nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black, and joining me this evening, we've got John Anderson.
Good evening.
We've had a late call-off for Iain Hay, who is unwell. So Iain is not joining us this evening, but we wish Iain a speedy recovery. We're now live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. So if you're watching live, you can get involved in the comments and we'll select the best to talk about as we go along tonight. If you can't watch live, you can still watch or listen back on any podcast apps, on YouTube, on Twitter and Twitch as well. You can also visit the blog scottishrugbyblog.co.uk for all the latest news and views on Scottish rugby. We've also got a Patreon page where you can get access to ad-free versions of the podcast, as well as exclusive monthly content for as little as £3 a month. If you pay £5 a month or even more, as some people have chosen to do, then we'll read your name out on the podcast as a little bonus extra. So go to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast for that. Now, in a first for us, and you may notice John and I are, this isn't a uniform, by the way. You may see that John and I are wearing some lovely snazzy T-shirts. Support for the podcast during the Autumn Nations Cup and the tail end of the Six Nations that we'll be talking about tonight. We will be brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming, offering precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. I suppose, John, the Scottish equivalent of that would be some wee clippy jaws for your hairy paws.
I think you've obviously worked on that quite a lot this afternoon.
I've been thinking about that this afternoon because now Manscaped are new to the UK, so some of the talking points we've been given that they'd like us to discuss are fairly American in nature, but I hadn't realised how popular trimming below the waist was. It's not something I've done. It's not something I'm planning on doing. But that I'm not ruling out the fact that our listeners might be interested in this. I think
yes,
Iain's given it a test run. Iain's given it a test run.
He has, yes, he has, and he's not here.
He's not here to report back. Now that's got nothing. I was stressed. That has nothing to do with Manscaped or their products. So this is what it is. Essentially, it's like a little small clipper there. I did use it for a wee shave, and I have to say, because it's designed to be used in sensitive areas, it was quite nice. It was quite nice. Quite gentle, I have to say.
I think it's quite good how discreet it is. I mean, that's it, full whack. I mean, it's fairly quiet.
Yeah, it's got a USB charger as well, so that's quite handy if when I do travel for work. It's quite handy to have the USB charger. It's got a wee light as well, so obviously you try to get down to a wee discreet area. So
or if you're in the dark and you're trying to find your way out the bedroom, or find your way to the bathroom, and you don't want to.
I thought you were going to say you found yourself in the dark, having brought a former lady friend, and you're frantically trying to do some last minute trimming. I don't know if that happens.
and you can't find a torch, your phone's nowhere to be seen. Off you go. The wee LED light. It's quite bright as well, actually. So
yes. Now they've said Iain, John, and myself. We've got this wee Manscaped bag. You can get this kit. Got some something called Crop Preserver, which is deodorant for your testicles. We've also got some Crop Reviver, which is testicle toner. Now, next week we might talk a little bit more about body image and things. They've also sent us some underwear and some t-shirts. The underwear you can get as part of the pack. Now, the underwear,
it's fantastic.
It's like a bra for the balls.
It is fabulous. I would go all in just for the underwear. It is fantastic.
I mean, I normally pay about £10 for a pack of underwear from Asda, so the bar is set significantly low for me. Yes, do you know what I mean? Like I'm lucky if I get 12 months out of them. But I described it earlier to someone as it feels like being gently cupped and kept in place all day in a non-sexual way.
I would have to concur with that. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting much because you get sent a pair of kicks in the post. You think, I'm not sure about these, but they were fantastic. I'm very, very impressed. They are now my new favourite pants.
I do. When we don't normally get sent pants in the post, our fans haven't reached that level yet.
Speak for yourself.
One of the things that Manscaped do is they support a testicular cancer society. So if you're buying one of these, and you can get 20% off and free shipping if you enter the code SRP at the checkout. So you will get a discount as well, and it's going along the bottom at the minute, and there'll be details on the blog as well if you're interested in exploring that further. Now they do support a testicular cancer society, and as many people will know, Alex Corbisiero is currently undergoing treatment for testicular cancer. So and we're in November as well, of course, as everyone knows, which is the time when people are growing a more to save a bro, all about men's health. So, while you're down there, while you're trimming, have a wee check. I always have a regular check just to make sure everything's in proper shape. It's not something men talk about, John, is it? I mean,
it isn't. No, it isn't, and it's a topic that should. Like, we laugh and we joke about this sort of thing, but it is a serious topic. And I remember when kind of Movember first became popular over here, the shock on people's faces when you grew a moustache, and then they go, "Oh, is that for Movember?" And you were like, "Yes." And by the way, can I talk to you about testicular cancer and testicular health? People were still very uncomfortable about it, so it's something we should all be talking about more.
It is. It normalizes it, because I'm not. I'm not someone that's. I don't think anybody's keen on going to doctors, but I've never been. I've had. I've got a couple of medical phobias. I'm not particularly keen. I'm always reluctant to go and see the old GP. But it's the problem is, if people put these things off, they feel something's wrong, and it only gets worse. So do check. Talk to your friends about this. Do have a wee check down there. Maybe you're trimming. While you're trimming, have a wee fumble, see if everything's okay, and if there's any problems, go and seek some help as soon as you can. Yes, that's Manscaped. So we thank them for their support. Like I said, you get 20% off if you go to manscaped.com and use the promo code SRP for Scottish Rugby Podcast. So that's 20% off with the code SRP at manscaped.com. Apparently your balls will thank you, according to them. Now I cannot confirm or deny that I've had conversations with my balls in the past. John, give them,
I mean, it was a rough Saturday night, and things had got out of hand. But
so yes, that's it. That's we've touched on testicular cancer this week. I think next week we're going to maybe talk about body image. There's quite a couple of interesting talking points around that, especially with Finn Russell when he was fat shamed. And there's some interesting. We talked a few episodes ago about why rugby players shave their legs. Now there is some interesting stats, and this is a tease for next week on whether ladies or men, gentlemen, prefer gentlemen hairy or trimmed, or completely shut. Oh, there's one article I found in Cosmo, as smooth as a squash, as smooth as the skin on a squash.
Wow. I mean, I like to attempt that sometimes. You know, it's a big goal of mine, but I mean, this doesn't just happen overnight.
No. So yes, so we're very grateful to Manscaped for supporting us during the Autumn Nations Cup. So if you're curious at all, like I said, go to manscaped.com, enter the promo code SRP, and you'll get 20% off any of the products that are on there and free shipping. So why not give it a little go? So tonight, we've got a little bit to get to. We were hoping to talk about Scotland women versus Wales, but unfortunately that match was called off because of the Rona.
Yep. Not
France,
Rona, but the Rona.
The Rona. France got the Rona first, and then I think there's some players tested positive, and other players that have been in contact with the French players that you would have thought everybody would have been in contact with. I don't know how much they analyse it. It's just like, well, you were on the wing. It was a prop, and you were on the wing. It was definitely no you.
Ruck inspector. That's you don't need to.
It's the TMO that's done it.
That's it. It was skating.
Yes. We've got, I mean, there's a bit of Lions news, but I'm going to save it for Hands in the Rucks. We've had a couple of Hands in the Rucks submissions around Lions tickets. We'll talk then. We'll start with Scotland men versus Wales.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I mean, we got an interesting question through on Twitter shortly after the game finished, and it's a good starting point because it was something I wanted to talk about, John. And it's Mark Agnew who got in touch, and he said, does our first away win in a decade, barring Italy, because Italy don't count, we know that, need to be contextualised by lack of crowds? Is this a corner turned, or will we never know until the crowds return? It's a Schrodinger's away wing.
That's a good way to think of it, yeah. It's a very good question. I think personally, I would say it does need to be contextualised. All the build up to the game was around, the game wasn't at the Principality Stadium. The game wasn't going to be in front of 80,000 people dressed up as leaks. So, I think Scotland definitely had an advantage in that sense. What was delivered on the park, would 80,000 leaks have stopped that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that the thing for me is that there was a sense of occasion with it, because this is, the first international played at Parc Scarlets.
Yep.
It's Alan Wynne-Jones is breaking his record as the most capped player of all times. You had the death of JJ Williams, one of Wales' all-time great players, in the background. Now, Scotland are not just playing Wales; they're playing the occasion. They're playing the fact that it's Alan Wynne-Jones' record. So I do think you have. I think if those things hadn't been in play, if it had just been any other game for Alan Wynne-Jones, if JJ Williams hadn't just passed away, if they were playing somewhere else, I don't know. There was a lot going for Wales in terms of an occasion when you take away the crowd. Now, would the crowd have changed things? Possibly, but there was really interesting. The first ever interesting article on Wales Online. We don't get many of them. There was a really interesting article on there, and where they talked about the noise in the stadium inside the ground. Now there was sound being pumped in. I think I don't think that was over the telly. That was so there was a couple of hymns in there. There was crowd noise being pumped in, and the Wales Online article pointed out that all the noise was coming from the Scottish bench. So they were celebrating every penalty, every turnover, every try, and the Welsh bench was silent. The Scottish players on the pitch, they were creating their own energy, and whether or not you agree with, all 15 players crowding around the scrum and slapping guys on the back or not, as the article pointed out, it's a way to get energy up.
Yeah, and I think that was it was interesting. We might touch on the game later on, but Ferris, commentating on the Glasgow game last night, he was giving it some chat about how he doesn't like that sort of thing, and he call him old school, but when can you not just walk away from a penalty and not have to cheer? And he's and the co-commentator pointed out, absolutely, it's a way for guys are struggling to get the energy going in the occasion. So, any little thing they can do to try and, I guess, create a bit of atmosphere for themselves is useful. And I mean, I think it's like, if you think to amateur rugby, you don't play in front of two men and a dog, and you all run about silent, and every penalty is not like everyone's silent and walks away. There's plenty of cheering and backslapping that goes on there. So if it's good enough for the amateur game, which I think is fair enough, then I don't mind it so much.
Yeah, I suppose the proof's going to be in the pudding when we come to potentially it's going to be the last game of this tournament, when we're actually facing a team away from home in a competitive match next. Because we've got France at home, we're Italy away, Fiji and Murrayfield as well. I think it's only that last match, and it's highly unlikely we'll be playing Georgia at Murrayfield. No. I would certainly hope not, because that means something's gone catastrophically wrong.
Yeah.
But I think there is an element of, yes, it wasn't at the Principality, it wasn't in front of a crowd, but I don't think you can underestimate the occasion. And I think the occasion possibly got to Wales, or they didn't use it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
And I'm surprised. I mean, I think that's, in a way, it's almost like, I think Alan Wynne-Jones' selflessness. I think by being captain, he put himself above the occasion, but actually, there for anything, if you, from a Wales point of view, you wanted Alan Wynne-Jones to be kind of getting in people's faces saying, I'm going to be the most capped player of all time, and I want to win this match, and you're going to do it for me.
Yep.
Yeah. But he was fairly anonymous. I thought he was quite fairly anonymous.
So he didn't have one of his standout games, and I think a lot of credit goes to the Scottish kind of back five, in terms of Cummings and Gray and the back row, for nullifying Jones. He's usually quite destructive in terms of line out. He can cause a lot of problems at maul time, and he wasn't. And I think that's credit to the way Scotland played. Yeah.
I mean, we could go. Should we go? We can go through the players. I mean, it's such a good win. It's probably worth just going through the player ratings, and we can have a chat. Rory and I did these on Monday, and this I'll stress, this was after one viewing of the match. I've gone back and watched bits since for the purposes of doing the pod. Now, I thought the front row had a good game. Fraser Brown. I think there's. I said in the player ratings, him and McInally are interchangeable for good and ill. I think they have almost the identical faults and pros to them. It's so, they both are liabilities for penalties.
Yep.
Their throwing is probably on a par, and the scrum doesn't go backwards when they're in the. It's very hard to choose between them. They're almost identical players in a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. I think the only difference is perhaps, McInally carries well. I think Fraser Brown's maybe slightly more destructive when he carries, but he's also slightly more destructive in that he gets broken. So there's that, but absolutely, they're pretty much, aside from a slightly dodgy hairdo, they're the same person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say which one has the dodgy hair. I'm not going to say it because, I'm being completely... I am Switzerland.
You'll be getting dirty pants in the post. That's what you'll be getting done. I think that it is a bit of a concern, particularly with Fraser Brown. It was a needless penalty to give away where he to block and injure himself in the process. It's a classic, Jeff Cross move that. For commit a foul and injure yourself in the process of doing so. That's a worry that he's still doing that, because I kind of felt like after that England game, he'd cut that out of his game a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. There's still, I think a lot of people were getting quite annoyed about it, because he does have a tendency to give those penalties away, and he's not been doing it as much, but it's still there, and there's still, I don't know, it's like the old back row instinct kicks in, where he still thinks he has to absolutely push the law to its breaking point. Whereas it's like, no, you're a front row, so you have your front row union. You can calm Fraser. It's okay. But yeah, it was a needless penalty, and do you know, there in some ways I can see. I think this might be a legacy. So there was such an emphasis at Glasgow put on counter-attack ball. There was lots and lots of chat about it being like essentially a set piece, and the kick return was a set piece. And players were kind of coached into those habits of just making sure that you're maybe not changing your line quite as dramatically as Fraser Brown did, but you're making sure that there's space for your fullback to, or whoever's fielding the ball to run into. And it does seem like a bit of a legacy of maybe Rennie's obsession with that part of the game, that certainly Glasgow players are more liable to give up penalties in that area.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the two props, then I thought Rory Sutherland had a decent game. Yeah. I think the one kind of question I've got is he is very strong in the scrum, but I think I was looking at his elbow, and
his possession is just slightly off.
Yeah, and it's I mean that's a technique. It's something that can be worked on, but it did that's why he got pinged in the first scrum, because his elbow was pointing straight at the ground. And we've said before, you need to paint the picture for the referee.
Yeah, get it up. Yep.
So if you're like this pulling it, looking like for all the world like you're pulling it down, you're going to get pinged every time.
Yeah, it's a really simple thing, and you know fine well. The guys in international property will have watched the video back and seen that, and Peter de Villiers will be all over that this week and next. As you say, it's just painting the picture. Even just in that first couple, if you're comfortable in that position, then if that's your natural kind of scrummaging position, that's fine. But if you've got a referee who's going to pick that straight up, you have to adjust and you have to change the picture to suit. Yeah. So,
but he didn't get pinged for it again, so. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Xander, he had a very good game, I thought.
Yeah. He's continuing this sort of scaling the mighty heights of World Rugby. I think one thundering carry at a time, isn't he?
Yeah. I've actually decided I've been unfair to him in the match ratings. I only gave him 7 for a breakdown, but actually, when I looked at the post-game stats, the official stats, he got 3 turnovers.
Yeah,
and that's a hell of a lot for a prop.
Yeah, no, he's very good at that. He's very good at that.
Yeah, and what's interesting when I watched the kind of game back, the way that they're using Xander Ferguson in defence, not in the 22, but like further up the park, is they're actually setting up a defensive pod with Ferguson in the middle and then Watson and Ritchie outside of him. So essentially what I assume is then Ferguson goes in, makes the initial hit, and then that gives the time for Ritchie and or Watson to kind of go over the ball and steal it.
Or the opposite's true, where if there's a slight change of direction, because I know Watson and Ritchie were pretty high up in the tackle count as well. So if there's any change of direction or the ball shifted, one of those two will make the hit, and then you've got Ferguson in position to come straight over the ball as first man, and he's a big unit to shift.
Yeah, so I mean, it's Jamie Ritchie made 11 tackles, and then Xander Ferguson and Hamish Watson were both tied on 10. I think Johnny Gray got 9 officially as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was down the tackle count again. Maybe just a change in the way he's been used.
I think so. I think that's what it's down to. I think we've come to. It's easy, I think, to say, oh, he's not making the tackles he used to. But I think it's more. I think that is definitely a positional thing, that he's not being used in that way, because him and I think in terms of the clear outs, I'll try and find the clear outs, the clear out stats now on here. But Cummings got 14 clear outs, Hamish Watson 13, and Johnny Gray 12. So they're definitely using Cummings and Gray to that effect. In fact, I think it's Cummings and Gray are second to the rucks, to our own rucks,
right?
Which is interesting. So they're very much kind of the attacking doing the attacking clear out. And when it comes to the opposition rucks, it's actually Johnny Gray and Xander Ferguson that are being used.
And again, that makes sense. You're saying too, if particularly the way Wales were playing, and the conditions, everything was quite tight. Everything, we weren't really seeing the ball shipped vastly away from the breakdown. So if you're getting those defensive, to cause a bit of trouble, Johnny Gray's a big lad, Xander's a big lad. You don't need to commit a huge amount of bodies to make Wales at least think about it when you're putting those guys in. You're not really competing. You're just causing enough aggression to make them think about it.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, the Cummings and Gray partnership, I think, is probably the nailed-on starting partnership. I think Scott Cummings, I think, he was one of Scotland's better players in the World Cup anyway, but he's really come on in terms of his game. I mean, I know from a Glasgow point of view, he's been touted for a while now, but he doesn't get the stats. He's not Johnny Gray. He doesn't rack up the stats, but he does. He gets in the faces of the opposition in that quiet way. He's not, he doesn't do the sandbags. He does the annoying, niggly things that Rob Harley does well.
I was going to just mention Rob Harley. It's almost like he's been mentored by Rob Harley at Glasgow or something in those dark arts. It's quite interesting. So he does. If rugby again was played in paper, he's not necessarily top of any of the stats, or obviously in this case he's been used well, but he is a fantastic player and he does those basics really, really well.
Yeah, he does. The line out though, it'd be interesting to know who called that line out on the line. Because the wind, I think, was entirely unpredictable on the day, and you could hear, Andrew Cotter and Chris Patterson talking about the fact it was different down on the pitch to what it was where they were, and we already had a couple of throws go squint. So to go for a long line out, I get, how many times have we talked about this with Scotland? It's the wrong decision in a crucial part of the park, at a crucial point in the game, and that was a lineup that just was begging to be thrown short, recycled, and booted up the park. I
think there was an element of both teams were kind of appealing to the referee to be more lenient to the conditions, and I think there had been plenty of chat on the park about, like, right, you need to kind of give us a break here, or we're just going to be throwing the ball squint all day. And I think there maybe was an assumption that perhaps you're going to get away with it on your own line.
Yeah,
the referee's going to be less likely to ping up a squint ball or whatever. But it was the wrong decision. There's no question about it. You throw it at the front, you clear the ball, job's a good one. But yeah, it was a bit brain dead, and it would be interesting to see who called it. But that's the thing, we've done this time and time again.
Yeah. I've got a comment from Josh Paul. He says, I remember an interview a while ago where Cummings said that this season he's explicitly become more like Rob Harley. I don't know if that means reading more books.
I'm assuming it's not meaning, or becoming more dad bod, but I'm assuming it's not that.
He says in terms of nuisance factor, but I think that's, he's learning from the best.
Yeah, Harley is an absolute, he's horrible. He's just, he's a lovely big guy. He's such a really, absolute gent with that big booming Rob Harley voice, but he's just horrible. On a rugby park, he just turns into this nasty, nasty person. In the worst kind of way, not in a Peter O'Mahony sort of way, or just a thug, but he's just horrible.
It was when he got to counting down.
Yeah.
-1, -2. Every called use it during the 1852 game.
Yep. He was at it again at the Glasgow Leinster game last night as well. He was just causing havoc. It was like every time there was something going wrong, it was Glasgow 4 was somewhere thereabouts. Bad man.
Before we move on to the back row, then I think the one last thing to say about Johnny Gray is he's carrying more, and certainly carrying with more of a threat than in the past, where we said he would just kind of like take the first tackle and fall over,
slump to the ground, defeated.
Someone's tapped my ankle. I better fall over and recycle the ball.
This is the point where I fall over and put the ball back to my team now. It's almost like it was a learned behaviour, but yeah, he's carrying me a bit more oomph.
10 carries, 40 metres made.
There you go.
That's more than we'd normally see from him.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for. Anything kind of above, the couple of meters made on each carry. On average, you're kind of happy with that in that position. We're not expecting long bursting Ben Toulis, 40 meters made in one run.
I don't think Ben Toulis is expecting that.
No, Ben was not expecting that. So, but no, that's good stats, and the Exeter effect can't be overlooked.
No, which we'll come on to in a moment. I think the back row. Then, Richie and Watson is fast becoming one for the ages. I think that partnership. We will come on to number 8 in a minute, but that there's very little to be. I don't think there's anything you can criticize them for in that game. It was. I'm not going to say it was a 10, but for a back row, that was pretty much a perfect performance. The discipline was excellent. They were listening. They were. I don't think neither of them got pinged for a penalty for hands in the ruck for. Not releasing the tackle. So that's as close to a perfect performance from two back rows as you can get.
Yeah, I thought they work really well in tandem as well. They've obviously honed that relationship at club level, and they really work well together. They are, we kind of always. It's a bit of a cliche to talk about the kind of hunting in a pack sort of idea, but they really are kind of like two kind of carnivores hunting for their prey together, and they're working in tandem. It's great to see, and Richie has, like, we all talked about Richie as being such a good option for Scotland, and he was going to be a future captain and all that sort of things, but he's actually probably delivered more in this short period of time than anyone thought he was going to. Yeah, he's irreplaceable now. He's first choice in the team now,
and I think as much as people have talked about him as being more of a 6 than a 7, I think he's got all the attributes of a 7 and a 6. I mean, he's that good, and I'm surprised. I think it was disappointing to see that he hadn't been named on the shortlist for player of the tournament. I mean, I completely think that Antoine Dupont will win that and absolutely should do. And I'm not arguing that Jamie Ritchie should, but he's probably ahead of CJ Stander and certainly ahead of Ben Youngs. I mean, he won.
Not according to some.
No, not according to some who shall not be named. But he's certainly been. He's won 2 Man of the Match awards. Jamie Ritchie got punched in the face by a player and kind of carried on playing.
Took a good punch. Yeah, it was a good hit.
Thanks to his metal face.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's actually part Terminator, so he's fine.
But I think his performances have been clinical, really, and I think that's the.
It's the problem you have with. It's the perennial problem Scotland have, that we tend to get a token player in these awards, and obviously Hogg's won it a couple of times in a row, but that's Stuart Hogg. He does very, very noticeable things that certain media outlets tend to pick up on, as opposed to being just a horrible person in the back row causing carnage. That doesn't sit. It doesn't look as good on a YouTube highlights reel. It doesn't look as good on maybe certain programs highlights, whereas Stuart Hogg running riot through a defence can do. With regards to other back rows for other countries, it's always it's the normal names that get kind of thrown out. CJ Standers, and I don't even think he was the best back row for Ireland, to be honest. Let alone, but and
I think I think they're both in with a shout of the Lions, no doubt. I don't, you see other people putting other names forwards, but I think the win away to Wales, I don't think we can underestimate that. I know it's too early to talk about Lions technically, because really we're probably looking at Six Nations and whether or not the Lions 2 will even go ahead.
Well, there's that as well, yeah.
But I think they could surprise. People will call it a surprise selection, but it wouldn't be a surprise to me to see the two of them called up and even used in tandem.
Yeah, I think there's a massive argument for that. If you think around the other home nations, 6-7 is, the fact that you've got kind of Mauro Itoje being touted as a 6 is enough sign that England are they're confused in that position. Which, given that Eddie's gone mad about centres recently, it's not a surprise. He tends to say these weird things. Ireland, again, they basically they could play. I think the Lions could end up being the Leinster, 8th team and probably still be a very good Lions team at this rate. But they've got good options in the back row. But again, have they got anybody that offers what Richie and Watson do? Maybe not. And Wales, I mean, Gatland will pick players, but actually I think Wales were really, really poor. Let's be honest, they were poor.
I know, and there is that, and I think that some people have thrown that up, but I think you can't. They're still Wales.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's a poor Wales team, but that was still
what's in front of you, and there were still British and Irish Lions in that Welsh team. There were still people that have won Grand Slams in that Welsh team. It was a poor performance, and it's I think some of the players are maybe living on past reputations, but it's still a decent Wales team.
That's it, and I think that it was overall a very clinical performance from Scotland. Probably one of the most error-free kind of professional performances I think we've seen for Scotland in years, in living memory almost.
It was very, very tough conditions as well.
Yeah,
it was interesting watching it because how bad the weather was. You could see how bad the weather was, but watching it, you wouldn't necessarily have thought that from just and that was a surprise because sometimes these matches end up similar to the England game this year, which should be erased from everyone's hard drives. It just turns into an absolute error fest. But and credit to both teams. Let's not take nothing away from Wales in this instance. They made the conditions look easier than they clearly were. I just think Scotland handled it a lot better and showed a real maturity that surprised me. Completely surprised me.
Yeah, and before we move on I want to talk about maturity in a minute. We'll talk about Ali Price. I mean, Blade Thompson, I think it was a perfectly, functional performance, and that's. I've got nothing I can say bad about it, but he didn't stand out at all, and I don't necessarily feel like he's nailed his colours to the mast in any way as Scotland's starting 8.
Yeah,
but he. I can't fault him either. It was a very 7 out of 10 performance. I think is the best thing I can say about it.
The thing I thought about Blade Thompson, I totally agree. I think it was just a completely functional performance. And what I was thinking about it is it's interesting how we think about our number 8s in Scotland. So I kind of thought of two names came to mind. So had Ryan Wilson had that performance, it would have been a 5 out of 10. He should never pull the shirt on again performance. And had Dave Denton had that performance when he was still playing, it would have been a 9 out of 10. He should start for the Lions. He should have become an All Black, performance. We have such a skewed view of what we want from an 8 that we just want this absolute rampaging 6'5" monster to be tearing back rows and throwing them over their shoulder. But Thompson done a lot of really good work, and particularly he was in there for his line-out work as well, which I thought, he done well there. Very functional. Yeah,
and that's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely not.
We need players in there that can do that. We don't want, for all of, we talk about Dave Denton, for all Dave Denton's Hollywood runs with the ball and, the things that he did do when he did them well, he was he was also a massive liability defensively and in attack. He'd get himself isolated more often than not after kind of beating a couple of men.
Yeah.
So actually to have someone that's maybe a bit more pragmatic, and I feel like we're going to talk about pragmatism a bit when we get to the centres in a moment. But
it's a word I think I've mentioned that word a couple of times in recent podcasts. It's fast becoming one of my mantras, I think.
Yeah. Ali Price. Now,
Ali Price.
There is a school of thought on Ali Price that he's too slow. Now, I would say one man's slow is another man's controlled game.
Yes.
The interesting thing I found today, so I was looking at the match stats. Now, Antoine Dupont has obviously been heralded as he's the world's greatest scrum half, according to any kind of anybody who watches rugby.
Watch the last 3 weeks of rugby. He's the greatest thing in the world ever.
Yes. And I've no doubt he's a very good scrum half, and so is Faf de Klerk. Now, Ali Price, here's the interesting thing. People have said he's too slow. Now, if you actually compare Scotland's average ruck speed, so that's the speed of a ruck forming and the ball getting away, Ali Price's ruck speed is faster than Antoine Dupont.
Yep.
He completes... get the ball away from 45% of our rucks in less than 3 seconds. Now, that surprised me because I thought it would be higher. 46% is 3 to 6 seconds, and only 9% of Scotland's own rucks took more than 6 seconds. With Antoine Dupont, his 6 second plus rucks are much higher. His percentage is much higher than Ali Price's.
Right.
So I think demonstrably Ali Price is not slow. And we were talking about this on the group chat earlier and Al Kerr was pointing out, is it because of who he's passing to? So Antoine Dupont tends to be passing to his backs, who are then recycling, maybe doing flashier things with the ball. Ali Price is recycling to forwards who are running into brick walls and the walls being recycled.
Yeah, it's almost like rucks get merged in some way, because he's getting the ball away fast, but it's fast to a forward, to crash, to form another ruck, to do repeat, to create, it's almost like people sort of just see a ruck and go, oh, that's taking ages. It's like, no, there's been 3 rucks. It's fine.
Yeah. It's like the Doppler effect of rucks.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. Yeah, I think it's always been a bugbear of mine. And we've talked about this in the past as well, that we always want the scrum half that we don't have. And for years it was Greg Laidlaw was slow, and then Ali Price was the messiah. He was the rapid running threat, and I still think I think there's a part of me agrees that Ali Price does have more of a running threat than he offers, but it's almost like there has been, it's coaching, it's game plan, it's being told, what, only go for it if it's on, because let's be a bit more pragmatic about this.
Yeah, it's control, isn't it? I mean, the one thing, I think the fact that he made, a British and Irish Lions fullback look absolutely stupid by kicking to the corner twice in a row towards the end of the game just shows, it was really smart.
Yeah, and I think there is, obviously with the injuries that had happened during the game, I think a lot of the pressure had moved on to Ali Price to act as the senior decision maker in that area. So, obviously Hogg came in at 10, but Hogg's not played 10 in forever. No. So, Ali Price is the man calling the shots at that point. And it was, again, it's interesting we talk about Dupont. It was quite French in the way that we done it. Everything was coming through 9. All the control was coming through 9. And it was a great thing to see. And and I know there's been a bit of chat about, is being slow the new definition of being controlled, and is that the measure of game management? And Scotland fans are weird.
Well, I know that. I think you can't have it both ways. Either we have to accept that this is the new Scotland is pragmatic and we will shift defences around using our forwards to build a platform, and when it's on, we will hit the gaps and we'll have stretched the defences and we'll go. We're not playing the fastest brand of rugby, trademark patent pending anymore.
It's gone.
It's a solid platform and solid. A solid defense. You need a solid defense to build a good attack.
Yep.
You can't. It's like the a cursed monkey paw. You can't have something has to go. And I'd rather win games. I'd rather win games through having good defense and win more games than I would score fancy tries every 3 games.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if we could score fancy tries every game and run riot in every game and win them, then obviously we would all give up our, right leg for that. But it's not going to happen. It's international rugby. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and I think you watch if you watch the All Blacks, a lot of the games that All Blacks win are down to pragmatism and good defense.
Yeah.
For all the Hollywood offloads and the highlights reels, they do the basics very well, and that's what Scotland are trying to do now. And
they build through the forwards. And I think there was a really interesting stat. People always talk about the kicking game, and the All Blacks were I think it was at the World Cup. The All Blacks were one of the top teams for kicking. Because again, it's pragmatism. They play the game in the right places at the right times. When it's on, and that's when Hollywood can, explode into life. But otherwise, it's you look at the All Blacks forwards, and you wouldn't necessarily. I mean, some of them you would say are probably some of the best in their positions in the world, but as an 8, you would never really, given the option of picking an All Blacks pack, you would never really take it. You would always think of some a South African pack or even an English pack, but individually they just do everything really, really well, and they create that platform for the other players outside them to do their bit.
Yeah. Speaking of individuals doing things really well, we'll talk about fly halves now. I'll lump it all together because it was we don't have any updates as things stand. I think the last we heard was that Finn Russell's injury isn't looking too good, but we haven't had an update yet, so touch wood, that is a good sign. Adam Hastings popped his shoulder twice.
Yep.
They are a little bit more hopeful that isn't going to require anything more than a bit of rest. So I think there's an outside chance that you might 2 weeks and Adam Hastings will be fine.
And I think outside chance, and I think it's anyone who's had a shoulder dislocation will know that once you've popped it, if you choose to get up and play on and choose to continue to tackle international back rows with said popped shoulder, you're likely to pop it back out quite easily. It tends not to be the recommended treatment path for a dislocation to put it in front of an 18-stone rampaging back row. I mean, some doctors may correct me, but last I checked, it was not recommended.
It would not be recommended way forward.
I don't think I've seen that.
Unless you kind of put it to what you've popped it, put it towards him as a way of popping it back in again.
Maybe if you'd done it just before half time and then swapped sides, and then we would have been fine. But shoulder dislocation for a person in his position, obviously shoulders are never ideal, but if it is a clean pop and it's been popped back in and there's no other complications, the problem with dislocations is there can be muscle tears, there can be other things going on around it that can cause problems. If it is just a clean dislocation, then strap him up to the heavens and see if he can get through. Otherwise,
he had a good game. It was good to see him put Georgia behind him because he hadn't had a great game for Georgia. But he when he came on, I mean, Finn Russell was Finn Russell. That's as much as I could say about Finn Russell. He was on the park 22 minutes, and he was Finn Russell. And I've no doubt that we would have scored maybe another couple of tries with Finn Russell there. I thought Hastings came on and looked much more confident than he had done against Georgia.
Again, very composed. There was a maturity and a calmness about the performance. There wasn't as much of the. I mean, there was a couple of the Hastings runs up the blind alleys to see which back rows try to smash them, and then quickly throwing a hospital pass to the nearest forward. Only a couple of those, that's progress. If we can gradually dial them down, then by the time he's Finn's age, we won't necessarily be seeing as much of those. So no, yeah. I thought it was very mature. He kicked well in terms of ball in hand. A difficult day for goal kickers as well. So, but no complaints whatsoever. I think we criticised him last time out. I think he deserves plaudits this time.
Yeah. Move on to the centres then, Lang and Harris. We've had a couple of hands in the rock about this. We might as well touch on it now. Chloe Stanton got in touch to say her hands in the rock is people bashing the centres no end because they want their favourites to play. How quickly some people have forgotten the nation decrying our lack of grit and doggedness in the back line. Isaac McDonald got in touch and said his hands in the rock is learning that Chris Harris has won 65% of all his games for Scotland, which is the highest. This is a Kevin Miller stat. It's the highest stat of any player with more than 20 caps.
20 caps, right? Yeah.
Anyone more than nobody with more than 20 caps for Scotland has won as many games as Chris Harris. And he said he's slightly taken the wind out of my sails when it comes to criticising him. He says, although my counter would be his knock-on that would have been a certain try at the weekend. I think that's harsh. I mean, Hogg could have dummied. I thought the fact that he did do the one, he was in a position to do a 1-2 with Hogg shows that he is a real attacking threat. And he is scoring. He comes in at an angle, he scores tries for Scotland.
He looked good. He looked good attacking wise. He was starting to create space outside. He was starting to create lines. I was impressed, and I think the Hogg one, okay, right. So he knocks it on, but it's brung back for the forward pass before then anyway. And again, you've got to take into account it was horrible weather.
Yeah,
he should have taken it, but how many times? It's not like he was on over the try line and spilled it in front of him or anything. He was taking the ball at pace on a really, really, really good move that he had created. I think, if we're going to lambast players for trying these things and it not coming off, then let's go back to, early 2000s and let's call Dan Parks out of retirement and just kick the leather off it. It's silly.
Yeah. And I think, I think James Lang has been quiet in attack, but I don't think that's down to James Lang. I just think it's down to the tactics that Scotland are playing in attack. They're not using their centres as not using 12 as first receiver anymore. And that's something we maybe had come to expect from them.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift away from that. And I think that partially answered so again, watching the game last night with Sam Johnson, Sam Johnson was used as first receiver for Glasgow on many set piece moves, and he was very good. He was very, very aggressive and thunderous and broke tackles, but I don't think Scotland are wanting to do that. So why not have a solid defender who can play a bit of ball from 12? I agree with you. I think he was quiet. I think there's more to come from him, and I hope that we see that, because I think he is. I think he does have quite a. He has something about him that's a wee bit different.
He didn't make. I think the thing is, it was error free for Scotland. I mean, that was mostly error. I think there's a couple of forced errors in the stats, but it was an error free defensive performance, generally speaking, as error free as we've seen from Scotland. I think the most missed tackles came from Harris and Lang, but there's a reason for that. I think because of the way that Scotland defend, particularly outside the 22 in the midfield, where Lang and Harris are coming up fast to kind of break off to disrupt the attack. So almost straight away, anybody that breaks the line, there's cover there, but they're having to kind of track back to tackle, and the more likely, I think, in those positions, you are inevitably going to miss tackles.
Yeah, they're playing the Nick Grigg defensive line of flying out to cause carnage. Now, Nick Grigg takes it a step further and flies out and then smashes the first man he meets, which the ball sometimes is 3 men away by that point, and it's like, all right, okay, that's just Grigg, that's what he does. But there is an onus on centres to really come up and create that pressure, because you don't want the men getting. It's a great way of stopping the ball getting onto the outside, is if you can cause an error in midfield, or at least create a bit of doubt in midfield, then you perhaps get your opposition centre cutting back in, coming back on the play, which brings your forwards back in the play. It's a tactic, of course it is, and it doesn't always work, but there's always cover, which is tackle's fine if there's cover.
And we've seen time and time again, it's good in a way. It's good that there is that cover there, and that the as a team and as a squad, they trust each other, because that hasn't always been the case. I mean, how many times have we seen players not trust each other to make the tackle?
Yeah,
especially, and Stuart Hogg's been one for it in the past. There's been a cover tackling coming in, and rather than track the other man, he's gone for the tackle and someone's away for a try.
Yep. No, it's Hogg and Harris were two of the people in the World Cup who, of course, done that for Japan. That I think 2 tries for Japan were caused by that very issue.
May have lost Joe. Back.
No, I'd lost you slightly. It was like,
had you? Oh well, here we are back.
Yeah, we're all back again. It's all back. Yeah. So Hogg and Harris, defensive stuff. Yeah, it was good to see them backing each other to make those tackles. Which is good. Yeah, good defence.
The wings, Darcy Graham's Darcy Graham. I mean, he hits his rucks, he makes his tackles.
How many rucks did he hit? Because it seemed like every second ruck he was there smashing people.
He doesn't make the stats, because he only gives you the top 3, because you're the top 3. So he's not in the top 3 of rucks hit at all. But it's I mean, I wonder if it tells me on the total. I mean, but it does seem particularly ridiculous. It might actually tell me. Disproportionate. I might actually have some stats here. Hang on, I think I found the stats for rucks hit. It does seem that he's always there defending ruck arrivals. Where's Darcy Graham? Here we go. Darcy Graham. Attacking ruck arrivals 6.
6.
Defending ruck arrivals 3.
Oh my God. So
nobody's. I mean, for attacking ruck arrivals, there are other players that are higher. But for defending ruck arrivals, nobody else has got into above 1 in the backs. So to hit 3, he's
5'10". He's 5'10" and just over around 13 stone.
Yeah,
probably wet.
He's hit more defensive rucks than Scott Cummings.
Come on. Come on. He loves it, doesn't he? He loves it. He's a back row in a tiny winger's body.
Yeah. He hit the same number of defending rucks as Taulupe Faletau. Yeah.
Good man.
So Darcy Graham. Yeah,
when he got his hands on the ball, he was a threat with the ball in hand as well. We talk a lot about his defensive game, and he's a menace, because it's almost like they don't expect him, and he just comes in and has a disproportionate strength for such a small man.
I think as well, and he's not. I think that during the World Cup, I think he was you could tell he's trying very hard in attack, and that's not there anymore. Again, he's much more patient, and he's trying things. He's taking his chances when they're there, and he's doing what he needs to do when it's not
forcing it. Yeah,
Blair Kinghorn passed the ball.
He did. Yes, I noted it, rewound it just to check. It happened. We obviously need to offer complete apologies to everyone that we offended by suggesting that Blair Kinghorn was not capable of passing the ball. He has proven us wrong, and therefore we will be, obviously accepting any potential lawsuit that Blair's representatives want to put our way.
Yes. I was not full of praise for Blair Kinghorn in the last episode. I would say there was he, the try line was a begging, and he failed to pass to Adam Hastings. And there was still a couple of times when he could have passed and didn't. So it's still an area of weakness. And what I will say is that, as often gets picked up in highlights and looking back, he positionally, apart from there was one moment where positionally he wasn't very good, positionally he is very good. His positional awareness is top drawer. There was the first penalty that Wales gave away was because Kinghorn came to the ruck and actually forced Liam Williams to come in at the side.
Yep.
So that's what the referee saw, and that was I watched it back. That was deliberate. That was deliberate on Blair Kinghorn to get Liam Williams into that position, to force him in at the side, force him to be offside. There was the turnover within Scotland's 22 where Hogg was isolated. It looked like Kinghorn was running away. Now, I think what he was doing is he was spreading out to get the pass so he could go up the wing. So there was probably space there, and Hogg held on to it. It looked for all the world like he was running away.
We will never know.
No, but such a fine margins, and he runs into supports for Hogg into contact, and the ball's recycled. Hogg throws him the pass, and he's away. He's away. Up the wing and into touch, and takes a bit of pressure off. So fine margins and all of that.
I thought he was in the team obviously for his aerial game, and full credit to him. He coped very well in, again, very difficult conditions. He was up, done really well to kind of, where there was enough space for the kick chase. I thought Scotland, in terms of work-ons, I think Scotland's kick chase in particular was actually not that good. And had Wales could have done better in that space. They had opportunities and they didn't. I think they were conditioned to kind of kick the ball away as well. And Scotland probably gave them too much ball without giving Kinghorn or even Graham the opportunity to get up and challenge.
I think that's another thing that we need to come to expect now from Scotland, is that team selection is going to be horses for courses.
Yeah.
I think especially during this Autumn Nations Cup, I think Townsend doesn't have an idea who his best team is, and that's a good thing.
That is a
what
good
I think
thing,
he's doing now is he's choosing the best team for the opposition. And yes, you can't worry too much what your opposition does, but that's tactically astute. So
yes,
there is I think there's an argument for Duhan van der Merwe to be on the bench, because a player like him running at tired legs, you saw it. I mean, he I think he's one carry in the game. He burst through about 5 Welsh defenders.
Yeah, there was
3 of them hanging off his back.
Yeah.
And he offloaded as well. So, he's going to, when there's, you want him on the pitch when there is space to be had, and you want guys confident under a high ball when you're up against a team like Wales, who are going to, from their back three, are going to rain kicks down on you for 80 minutes.
Yep. And then if you're up against a team like Fiji, who are going to run ball at you, or you're going to get the opportunity at maybe some kind of mispositioned defence, then you want guys like Duhan to be kind of fronting up and physically, and getting back into kind of physically intimidating the opposition. But you're not going to do that against Wales. And I think we all questioned the decision, but Townsend was vindicated, and well played.
Yeah, and I think that's like I said. I think it's something we need to just accept now, that there isn't a best. That the Scots, probably aside from the forwards, the rest of the team is going to be picked according to what's needed. So you're always going to have Price at 9, Russell at 10 if he's fit. Outside of that, and Hogg at 15, I think outside of that, it's horses for courses.
Yeah, and I think I mean, you're talking kind of the spine of the team. You're going to see Richie and Watson. You're going to see probably Gray, but there's probably more of an argument that you're going to see Cummings. He seems to be, the stat is that he's played 13, 14 games in a row now for Scotland or something like that. So, you're going to see those guys. You're going to see one of Brown or McNally, depending, who's least broken at that point. And other than that, it's fair game. I think there's probably an argument more for a guy like Fagerson, who I think he has nailed that shirt on now. I think it is his shirt. I think any kind of chatter around
the drop off to Simon Bergen is huge.
Yeah, it is. Although I will say the front row, when it came on, there wasn't a noticeable step backwards. It wasn't like we were in trouble. I think there were one point they were shoved off the ball, but it was Wales put in. So I think that it was fairly even. I think in terms of the bench, that might be where we see him messing around again, horses for courses. Dupree off the bench, I think, had another good game. I thought
it was okay. Yeah,
I thought he did better made more of an impact than Thompson, but I think that's probably more of an argument to keep Dupree on the bench to come on and make that sort of impact than it is to start him.
No, it's a difficult position, isn't it? It's just trying to work out what we want from that 8 is really hard, and obviously, you throw Matt Fagerson into that mix as well, and you just kind of it's difficult.
It's a difficult one. Yeah, I think in terms of the bench, the pick of the bench for me probably was Dupree. I think everybody else that came on did a job.
I would have said maybe Ollie Kebble might have had an argument there.
Yes,
I thought Ollie Kebble was fantastic when he came on.
Yeah, and I think that's another one where Kebble from the bench. I think that's where you want him coming on, because I think as Iain did a tweet at the weekend showing that you could see the passion was there.
Absolutely wanting it big time, wasn't he? He was, he's a huge big man, huge big lad, and you can argue all you want about the residency stuff, and we've all we've done that one to death and somewhat more, but he wanted it. He wanted the win. And if you got that guy in a blue shirt wanting to win for Scotland, that's fine by me.
Yeah, that's it. Anything else on Scotland v Wales for you, John? I think
the only thing I think it's interesting. I think Wales are at the start of a journey Scotland went through, or have been going through. I think Wales are almost going the opposite direction of us, in that they want to try and play faster and play more loose, and Pivac's try to encourage that, similar to what they've done at the Scarlets. I think there's an argument that doesn't work at international level, and Townsend's kind of obviously moved away from that. The brand of rugby they played at Glasgow is not what we're playing at Scotland now, and we are winning games. I think Pivac's maybe got Wales going the wrong way, and they have been unlucky with injuries and various things, but the stats are saying now that's him. He's lost, it's 5 on the trot now. One of their worst Six Nations performances in quite some time, certainly in the last few years. The pressure's on him. So, which is a shame. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, I think overall, in terms of the Six Nations for Scotland, we had the Tuesday clock at the start of all this.
We did, so long ago. Oh, yeah. We did.
Someone was asking. I'll find out who it was. Was asking what happened to the Tuesday clock.
Oh, where is it at now?
Where is it at now? And that's an interesting question. I think it's probably about 7 o'clock in the morning at the minute.
Yeah.
Shona Milligan said, wondering where the Tuesday clock's sitting at now the Six Nations is done. I think we're somewhere after breakfast.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the alarm's set, and it's going to go off, and we're going to get up and brush our teeth. No, let's be fair. We were a couple of bad bounces and one bad weather day away from a very, very good Six Nations result.
Yeah.
And that was in spite of everything that happened with Finn Russell. So we really need to, and I'll hold my hand up. I was one of the talking heads who was very, very, very critical of Townsend at the start of the Six Nations and was questioning his position. And I think he has done really, really well. He has learned. It seems he's learned a lot from the mistakes. Now, they always talk about learning the lessons. Have we finally learned the lessons? What are those lessons? Who knows? Yeah. But I think it is bring in lots of very, very good coaches, and you will, or get a functional defence. There's a great idea. Let's get a defence coach who can defend. Woohoo!
Yeah. I think about Australia are probably absolutely cursing. Having sold the dud.
That's it. Yeah. Who's Matt's agent?
I think he's got the same agent as Scott Johnson, isn't he?
And Dave Rennie, yes.
Yeah. So,
and Derek Cotter for that matter.
Yeah, it's interesting anyway. I think where we are now, I think it was hard to see at the start where Scotland were going, and I don't think the losses helped for us to see the wood for the trees. And I think because of the Finn Russell thing, that clouded so much at the start.
Yeah,
I don't think Gregor Townsend had the chance to kind of explain or tell the story of what Scotland were trying to do and the changes that he'd made, and we didn't get a chance to see that because, like you said, one drop ball against Ireland. That game's got, that hog dots down, we win that game. The absolutely horrendous weather, against England. Again, a couple of different decisions go a different way.
Yep.
And that was such a tight game, looking back at it. And then we win the other three.
Yep.
So
let's get away from this idea that we beat France because they got a man sent off. We were,
we were in control of that match.
Any pundit that's saying that is lazy and clearly wanted a Grand Slam for England.
Yeah. I mean, we Dupont struggled in that game from memory because of the pressure that Scotland put on him. And that was deliberate, and I think that's, yes, that was a good Six Nations. We've got one last, Daft Craigie on Twitch before we move on to a very special Where's Dougie Donnelly. So speaking of lessons learned, did Scotland learn from the England loss to play better and win in horrendous conditions in Wales? I think they probably did, to be honest.
They talked a lot about it in the press in the run-up, that they were basing a lot of their game plan on what the weather was going to be, and that they had taken lessons from that day at Murrayfield. I think, we've got to just give credit where it's due. Coaches have, it seems like the most simple thing in the world to say, we played in horrendous conditions, we got a couple of things wrong, let's do it better. But they done it, and that's really, really good. So no, absolutely they did.
And they're learning on the pitch as well, because there's a couple of high balls went up early on, and we didn't rely on that so much as the game wore on against Wales. Wales did.
Hogg in particular was really striking the ball really low to find, and you saw, Townsend was talking in the build-up about Finn Russell's kicking and his ability to find grass with his kicks, find space. There was obviously an understanding that we weren't going to be thumping the ball up in the air and having it flap about in the air and then try and compete for it. So I think or certainly that wasn't the plan once they realised the conditions were the way they were. So got to give credit where it's due.
Lovely stuff. We're going to move on and do this now.
Well, we looked high and we looked low, we seen Dougie Bop on in the speedos, but I just want to know, did you see the legend that's Dougie Donnelly?
Yes, it's Where's Dougie Donnelly. Now, this section of the podcast, we ask you to send in sightings of anybody famously loosely connected with Scottish rugby. It could be a pundit, it could be a player, it could be somebody's brother's uncle's cousin. The more obscure, the better. We've had two, count them, two, despite current, lockdown conditions. Two Dougie Donnelly sightings, although they may be historic. I will caveat it. Dunks B got in touch. He said, pretty sure I saw Dougie Donnelly getting into his car in the Marks and Spencer's food car park in Dunblane. I was too starstruck to go up and ask if it really was the big man, but the yellow wash was definitely a giveaway. Sadly unclear what he was having for tea.
Good effort.
I think he's a meal. I think he's an M&S meal deal guy.
Oh yeah. But he would do the meal deal to himself.
Bottle of wine to himself. And
two steaks, 2 fries, and a bottle of wine to himself.
Who else? We have Alex McClellan on Twitter as well said, I once saw Dougie Donnelly in Finniston. I walked or stumbled past him with a bag of fish and chips, and he said, "Oh, geezer chip," and I just growled at him.
Growled up? No,
that is a crime against. That's a crime against nature to have not given Dougie Donnelly a chip.
Everyone knows that in Glasgow, the rule, it's an unwritten law, but it's the law of the land that if anyone asks for a chip, you have to oblige. It's like someone asking to use your toilet. You know, under some ancient law, you have to oblige them this opportunity. If you get asked for a chip, you have to give a chip.
It's like the opposite of in York, where you can still shoot a Scotsman in the back with a crossbow.
Yeah. It's that, but the Glasgow version.
Yeah, fair enough. I like it. It's less violent. So if you've seen anybody out and about, then do get in touch with us. We're going to pop in. We're going to finish off with this. Yes, it's Hands in the Ruck time on the podcast. So this is where we ask you to get in touch with you or any other business, the things that have annoyed you or pleased you. Could be Hands in the Ruck can be a very pleasant thing depending on what the hands are up to. So we've had a few on Facebook on our we've got a super secret Facebook group. So if you sign up to the Patreon, you can get access to our super secret Patreon page where we've had our first post from a Patreon who posted in. We had a fun wee chat there. It's mostly me posting, but you'll get early kind of heads up to things that are going on the podcast. It's worth your money.
Maybe you feel like you, not specifically you, Cammy, but maybe a future Patreon subscriber feels like they might be an influencer and thinks, do you know what? I'm going to come into that super secret squirrel group and I'm going to make it the best secret squirrel group out there. So
yeah,
don't let the fact it's just Cammy posting put you off.
No, please post away and join the chat. Jason Kirk posted. He said, "Poor Dave Rennie must be regretting his life choices right about now." And Alan McDonald said, "Don't worry, as much vaunted man management skills will get him out of trouble."
I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah. Dave's getting a pasting from all and sundry, isn't he? It doesn't help that he's gone to Australia, and the All Blacks are giving him a spanking. And Australia are one of those teams. It was always going to be a difficult gig because they have not been very good for quite some time.
Yes,
and that international rugby is really difficult because it's not like you can go out and sign loads and loads of players. You are kind of stuck with what you've got unless you throw them all in the bin and bring in the youths, and that's not necessarily a good idea either.
Yeah, and so it turns out that international rugby isn't as simple as gathering the boys round and having a singing circle with the guitars and singing "Free Love Freeway."
Yeah, and just picking good men.
Yeah. So the other hands in that we've got is I'm going to get onto the Lions in a minute. I'm just delaying that. Ian Mackay, Hands in the Ruck. The element of Glasgow support already turning on Danny Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, this was going to be my kind of discussion point as well. It's complicated, and I understand the frustrations of Glasgow fans. I myself am a frustrated Glasgow fan. It looks like we're going backwards, and there's the last couple of performances. There was lots of positives last night, but ultimately the result was not good enough. And I think the big issue we have is that there was opportunities last night that we, in previous seasons under previous management, we would have taken those opportunities. Now, I don't think that's Danny Wilson's fault. I think that we are in a situation now where, because of restrictions on funding, because of restrictions on recruitment, because of the world we live in now, we have a few players. I'm not going to go into names, but there's a few players that we have that are maybe not quite at the level that we need now. And we are relying on them because they're all we've got. And they're maybe still better than everything else we have, but they're not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
It is. And I think the other kind of point that you look at the opposition in Leinster and the conveyor belt of talent that they've got, I think there is a kind of another discussion to be had, and this isn't Danny Wilson's fault, but why aren't Scotland producing players ready off the tread, young players who are able to step in without a drop in quality in the same way that Ireland can? Now, the Irish setup is different, but that's something that the pro teams need. And now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so that's not a quick fix. But the academies have been in place for a number of years now.
Yeah,
and
I think we have seen some of the results of that, in that there has been players who've come through the academies and who are now fully fledged internationals. I think ultimately we all look at the Leinster model and look at the Irish model and think, do you know what, we should be producing 8 teams worth of back rows every season, and that should be that. But it's not realistic in a sport that isn't as popular in this country.
Yeah. No, and I get that. And I think I suppose the frustrating thing is that we have players like, you've got your Stafford McDowells, and you've got these players that come in who demonstrably have the talent to play at that level, but there's something missing that it's taking too long. I think this transition is taking too long, and I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what the solution is, but the transition from academy or Super Six or whatever players come to being a consistent performer at professional level, let alone international level, takes too long, and that might be like a game time. But why can young Leinster players from an academy step up and just take to it like a duck to water, whereas our players take, aside from the freaks like a Darcy Graham or a Jamie Ritchie or a George, a little Hornito, they're able to do it, but other players aren't. And I don't know what the solution is.
That's the thing. Even thinking about George Horn's 25.
Yeah.
He's not young, and he's still considered kind of like he's kind of fresh out the academy, when he's not. He's a third year professional who is, realistically, if you say a professional rugby player's career, probably 33, he's got 8 years left of his career. We're already starting to count down when does Hornito, you reach your peak at 28. Horn's peak might only be a few years from now, and that's great, but players are taking too long to come through, and I don't know, there seems to be this reluctance in Scotland that age still matters. We seem to throw people in later than others, and I might be completely, it's just a feeling. I don't have the numbers in front of me to kind of confirm that, but it just feels like we maybe don't throw players in as early. And if anyone's trying to tell me that Stafford McDowell isn't as good a player as maybe Nick Grigg, then, it's a difficult one, because he's obviously not showing something during the week.
Yeah.
Now, is that attitude? Is it commitment? Is it just game plan? We don't know, but something isn't there, and it's really disappointing.
Yeah, and I think it's almost, I'm not sticking this at the door of any players, but the reaction you get to, say, a foreign-born player playing for Scotland, and the reaction is it's taking chances away from Scottish players, and there isn't, there's part of me say, well, they're not good enough.
Yeah.
And the response needs to be, I need to get better, because that's the competition. I need to raise the level of my game. And I wonder whether or not there is that mindset of almost like a defeatist mindset. And it might be cultural. Oh God, this is us as Scots, isn't it? The cultural thing is, you stick two, they're picking the other guy, so I'm going to stick 2 fingers up and I'm going my way in a huff, rather than I'm going to get better than that guy. I'm going to do what he does. I'm going to have a nice, healthy competition with him and get better. And maybe that's what the good players do. That's what Adam Hastings talks about doing with Finn Russell. They get on like a house on fire. They get on very well, but they are competitive with one another, and that's why we have 2 very good fly halves. One who's world class, one with the potential to become world class. That's what I think George Horn probably does with Ali Price, and Jamie Dobie kind of coming through as well.
Yeah.
But in other positions, I think it might be the case that it's, I'm not getting game time, I'm off in a huff. And we've seen some of that come out of Glasgow recently with some of the disaffected players.
Yeah, it's interesting as well to think of guys like, obviously one of the first big project players we had come through was WP Nell. And WP Nell made such an impact at the Rugby World Cup in 2015. And there was almost not long after that, Xander Fagerson came through, and he was 18 when he made his professional debut. He was a kid. And we Xander became the heir apparent in some ways to WP. And obviously Bergen's come through as well. And, Bergen's sort of almost jumped WP in a lot of ways because, the Rib King has got old. But, outside of that, you always look at like guys like Darcy Ray, and I'm not picking on Darcy Ray, he's just an example of this. He had all the opportunity to kick on, and there's no argument to say that we brought in a foreign player in his position, and we bought a project player and replaced him with a project player. We didn't. He was usurped by an 18-year-old. He was beaten by a Scottish 18-year-old who done downhill biking at a very big level.
He was beaten by the BMX Bandit.
It was beaten by the BMX Bandit. It was beaten by the guy from the hit video game Paperboy, right? And you see Darcy Ray now. Darcy Ray's been around for quite a few years now and hasn't progressed. You saw him last night. He almost, for like a period of about 20 minutes, every single penalty was 3 offside, 3 not rolling away, 3 doing this, 3 doing that. He's not good enough. That's the facts of it. He's not good enough, and we're talking about professional sport. So if he's not good enough to play internationally, that's it. If you can work as hard as you can, but if you're not good enough, you're not good enough.
Yeah, and if you're not prepared to change the way that you play and learn from your mistakes and develop as a player, then you're not going to make that level, because that's what everybody else is doing. That's what the best players do. And I think that's what we want to do is create a positive culture of high performance in Scottish rugby. And you're not going to do that by selecting players based on the fact they've got they've got Scottish heritage rather than the best player. If you create the best player, that sends a message that we will select the best of the best. Yeah, not that we'll select you based on whose body you came out of and where they happen to be born. Yeah,
you happen to be born in the right hospital somewhere.
Yeah,
as opposed to you're the best player who is qualified for our country to represent our country at that given point.
Yeah, and if your attitude to that is to stick 2 fingers up and say, I can't believe you're picking the foreign boy, then you haven't got the right mindset to play sport at the top level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there is a counter argument that I maybe hadn't considered previously, and obviously I've had my views on this before, but I don't really care. There is a counter argument that the amount of investment that does go into project players and goes into signing players with a view to them becoming Scottish for all intents and purposes. There is a view that maybe that funding should be matched. If there's not the same opportunities for young players who have talent in Scotland. So I'm thinking of, we talk a lot about, so I'm originally from the Isle of Bute, and to play sport outside of Bute, you have to take a ferry, you have to travel, you have to stay overnight in places, and it is costly, and not everyone can afford that. And there was lots of talent, just using Bute as an example, there was lots of talented players at many different sports who maybe didn't get the opportunity to at least see if they could become professional because there was no support available for them. And there is almost an argument that we need to be funding that better as well.
Yeah.
But I think it works together. And, project players if a project player is better than any player we have in that position, they set the tone. They set the standard.
And I think that Darcy Graham's a very good example of someone who used the mindset in a positive way, the
Yeah.
two fingers up in a positive way. Darcy Graham was written off for being too small.
Yep.
I think Darcy Graham struggled. He got into the academy system despite the fact he was written off, and he reacted to being written off with the attitude, "I'll show you I'm a very, I'm going to be the best of the best," and
it shows in his rugby. It shows the way he plays. He's ferocious.
Yeah. And that comes through, and I think I think you're right. I think there's definitely more that can be done in scouting in Scottish players, but I think that the overall mindset needs to be that you're aiming for perfection, you're aiming to be the best of the best, and that that's what wins rugby games.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what we need.
We're going to get on to it. I don't know. Should I do the Lions chat jingle for this, or should we?
No, it's too early. It's too early
for Lions chat. We're not going to do
it.
Martin Bell got in touch on our super secret Facebook page and said his hands in the ruck is folk complaining about the price of Lions tickets. His original hands in the ruck his revised. His original one was the price of Lions tickets, but he's changed it to people complaining about the price of Lions tickets. So the cheapest Lions ticket on sale was £85 today. Now, my view on this is I agree with Martin. People complaining about it. This is a Lions game, and Scotland, Murrayfield has been hired by the Lions to host this match. The SRU happen to be an organisation that plays rugby. Is a rugby organisation. I think the fact the Lions have picked Murrayfield, yes, for rugby reasons, but also the SRU ain't setting these prices. And
I think there's a counter argument that they are part of the Lions committee, which sets the prices. But I mean that's a straw man argument, really.
Yeah, and if you can get that much money, I mean, they'll sell tickets at that price. Yeah. It's ridiculous. There's one's going on via Google for 13 grand. I mean, that's another matter altogether. That's disgusting. But I think, it would be lovely and romantic to sell £20 tickets to school kids, but it's the Lions. It rarely happens that the Lions play a game within one of the home nations, and that's a shame. But it will sell out, and at the minute, rugby needs all the money it can get.
Yes, it will sell out. Whether it will go ahead is a different question.
Is another matter altogether.
Yes,
yeah, and I get that people have paid the money for the Nevis membership for early access, but we covered this last week's podcast. That the whole idea behind the Nevis membership shouldn't be driven by self-interest. Essentially, the SRU were holding the cap out and asking for cash.
Yep.
And there was some benefits that were very clearly labelled as these may not be realised, but we'll give you something. We'll give you the prospect of maybe coming along to see a live match. We'll give you the idea that you can get early access to tickets, but what we want is your money so we can still function as a business.
Wages.
Yeah,
I think there is an optic thing here with regards to the Lions, and I think people forget that the Lions are not a national union. They are a touring select side that comes together every 4 years to fund the Southern Hemisphere. It's a commercial entity. It's there to make money, and it's a poor optic in the light of everything that's happening for them to be charging those prices. But those are the prices that rugby matches cost. People are saying it's only Japan. Well, it's not only Japan. It's the British and Irish Lions playing against another team. It could be Japan. It could be the All Blacks. It could be anyone. It wouldn't matter. It's the Lions. And the final kind of point to it, and we've said this a number of times, and we've said this about strips, and we've said this about memberships, and we've said this about all and everything that we talked about on this podcast and previous others. See, if you don't like the prices, don't pay them.
No.
Dead easy. No one's forcing you to. See, if you can't afford it, don't buy it.
Go to
pay your rent, pay your house, pay for food. Do what you need to do. Don't buy a rugby ticket. I'm not buying a Lions ticket. I don't want to go and see the Lions.
My plans. I've planned to do in the pub if that's possible. I'm going to go up to Edinburgh, meet some folk, go to the pub, soak in the atmosphere. But I'm not paying £85 for the pleasure.
Nope. Murrayfield's cold.
It is. It's quite the beer. Murrayfield's cold. The beer is expensive.
Yeah.
I'll find somewhere with a match on where I can have a pint.
Hopefully less than a $5.
Yeah.
And hopefully a nice coal fire. I know just the place, actually. I know a lovely pub that will do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention
there'll be, I can imagine
that.
that hundreds of people, hundreds of events on with tickets where you get some food and have people being interviewed at halftime. There are loads of. You'd probably be cheaper to go and get a dinner with a former Lion somewhere in a hotel, somewhere, and watch the game live than it is to actually go to the bloody game itself.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? I appreciate that some people want to go to it as well. And I've no, fine. There's no skin off my nose whatsoever. If you want to pay money to go and see a game of rugby, please. I have said before, I actually prefer watching it on television. I find Murrayfield cold. I don't actually like crowds all that much. I prefer it on TV.
Yeah, you can understand a hell of a lot more what's happening.
Yeah. You don't have to pay for the ref mic.
No. I was going to have a wee moan about people calling for players being called up on past glories rather than form, but I think I'll say that for another week. I think my one hands this is a nice hands in the ruck, and it warmed my heart was Roy Laidlaw's wife sadly passed away. Now she asked that money that was raised in her name was passed to the Scottish Injured Players Foundation, which I think is absolute, a lovely touch, and just shows, that Roy Laidlaw's a player from the amateur era, but to still have that connection and to want to do that, I think is absolutely marvelous. And obviously, there's the sad news about Roy Laidlaw himself's got dementia, I think, and there are things you can do if you're affected by it. There's a group called Rugby Memories, and we've been trying to arrange for months now to try and do a podcast with them, but a lockdown happened and it got habit. But there's a Rugby Memories group where people with dementia get together and they talk about rugby, and it's very therapeutic, and they talk about games. My uncle meets a guy who's got dementia, and I don't think he meets him at the minute, but they talk about football matches and the memory that the guy has of, he can name a lineup, he can name a moment in a football game, but he wouldn't know his way down the street.
Yep.
So there are these things going on, and the wonderful things. So if you have been kind of touched by the Roy Laidlaw story, then go and find your local Rugby Memories group and try and find out how you can support them. It might just be that you can arrange a Zoom chat with somebody and talk about rugby. It might be that you can sort out a quiz for them or something. So I'll put details of Rugby Memories on the sport. It's a part of Scottish Sporting Memories. So I'll put the link on the podcast page if you want to find out more about that. We'll be back potentially next week. We're going to keep that under review. Potentially we'll be back next week. There'll be a bit of Pro 14 to talk about, and we'll have the Italy up next, isn't it?
Italy up next.
Next. If we'll see where we are. I'm in deep dark lockdown. I've got nothing else better to do down here. I'm not allowed to leave my house.
By next week, we will have potentially had a few contributors of this said podcast / blog have plans to make music together. So this could be bold and exciting. So there may be feedback to come on that. Suggestions that it is 80s hair metal. Yes, this can be confirmed.
Well, we look forward to that. We've also got Scotland's hardest player of all time as well. That is coming to the podcast this month, and there will be some articles across the blog as well this month. We had to delay that slightly just due to for Rona related reasons, but hopefully they are. I'm locked down now in England.
It must be really difficult for people who have a Rona in their life. Like I'm particularly thinking of Iain with Rona and Rona Sweeting. It must be really difficult to be
especially when you're accused of mansplaining, when you're just trying to say something nice about Scotland women. Rona Sweeting. How dare you,
mate?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All I said was it was nice to see Scotland women get covered by Squidge Rugby, and that had nothing to do with being a man. It's only the fact that he's a well-respected rugby analyst, and the fact he picked up on it, I thought was a nice touch. But yes, I agree with Rona. They don't need the validation of a man.
Absolutely
not. But that wasn't the point I was making.
What you were trying to make, and
No.
I would caveat it with Squidge is not a man, Squidge is a squidge.
Squidge is a squidge. I think that's a good way to describe Squidge. So yes, that's it for this week. We will be back next week, I think, in some form or another. So keep your eyes peeled. Don't forget to go to manscaped.com for your 20% free shipping with the code SRP. Do look after your boss, and your boss will look after you. We'll talk a bit about body image next week.
Can I just say, with the Manscaped thing, the package it comes in is phenomenal. Like, the box is magnificent, and you get like there's like a newspaper as well, which is quite entertaining. Have you got it there?
I haven't got the newspaper because I don't have room. You do get instructions of how to safely look after your devices, and also how to safely do the business downstairs if that's something you want to do.
Go with the grain and point it upwards. Don't go down. Not good. No, not good.
No,
that's a different device, and that does a different thing.
Yes, and as according to Alan McDonald, a friend told him that it's no good using a beard trimmer down there. You need the proper tools for the job.
Exactly. Would you try to trim your hedge in your garden with a lawnmower?
No,
you absolutely would not.
No, proper tools for the job.
20% off. Go for it.
So
guys.
so not just for anybody with testicles. That's a good thing to have a look at that.
I'm sure it's unisex. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's. Well, I'm not getting into how I deep into the wokeness now, but you can identify in a different way, and still need trimming in relevant places.
There is trimmage for everyone.
There is, and so buy it as a wee treat for somebody in your life, maybe. Don't force it on them. Not if they don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine. Their body, their choice. If it's something you've talked about together.
If you buy it as a Christmas present for someone.
Yeah, there's a whole range of things. You can buy the pants, you can buy a nose trimmer. There's lots. There's not just this pack on there. They do the whole package.
I'm going to get some more of those pants because they are magnificent.
They are very comfortable pants. I will say that. I'm moving on from Asda, George, packs of 5.
I'd upgraded to like Costco. I'd went with multi packs from Costco, but like these are next gen. Like just. Yeah. Beautiful. I'll look forward to they're in the wash just now. They are getting processed. They'll be with me again soon. I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, I required John to wear the t-shirt tonight, but I didn't insist on him wearing the pants because that seemed pointless.
Well, I mean, if you had went down that route, I would have stood up for you. But in fact, I just have my Under Armour shorts on. I'm fine. I don't have my Manscaped pants on.
Ian did threaten to do a live demonstration, and that's not why he's not here tonight. But yeah, that's not.
Or is it? Or is it?
Yeah.
Crap call-ups.
So thank you very much for joining us this week. Don't forget to follow us on all the various social medias and subscribe to the podcast and all of that. Any questions, get in touch by email, podcast@scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. But for the moment, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from John.
Night, folks.